Ladies and gentlemen, the Africa Leadership Academy Marimba Band, I think they deserve a round of applause as they exit the stage. Whoa. Really, really lovely way to set the tone for tonight's gathering. Acknowledging the leader of Build One South Africa and the former recipient of the Africa Freedom Prize, Mr. Musi Maimani. The African Leadership Academy. We also have students from the University of Johannesburg who form part of the Literature Club. And we also have Miss Julie Barnes present, and I understand that she's also joined by her sister. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends of freedom, good evening and welcome to a celebration of freedom, a celebration of resilience. We are truly delighted that you could join us here tonight. My name is Mthoba Chapi, and I'm the head of media at the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom Sub-Saharan Africa Regional Office. So for tonight, feel free to call me MC, or MC squared, whichever one you prefer. So inaugurated in 2016 by FNF in Africa, the Africa Freedom Prize honors outstanding personalities who provide decisive impulses for the development of liberal societies in African countries. Promoters of democracy, protectors of human rights, campaigners for economic development, peace, and equal education. These are some of the issues previous recipients of the Africa Freedom Prize advocate for. Now, you may have heard this morning that the opposition leader in Uganda, who's also a former recipient of the Africa Freedom Prize, Bobi Wine, was arrested on his return from an international trip that included South Africa. His resilience, his consistency in standing up for human rights is what the Africa Freedom Prize is all about. We want to give recognition to individuals who fight for the freedom of others in unforgiving situations. And set to become only the second recipient of the Africa Freedom Prize, second female recipient of the Africa Freedom Prize, that is, Tsitsi Dangarembga's strength goes beyond being a respected and influential figure in the world of literature and social justice. She's an inspiration. Speaking as a young person, though the clock is ticking on me on that one, I know very well that the youth need mentorship programs, access to educational resources, exposure to positive role models, and opportunities for personal growth and development. When young people are inspired, they become a force for progress and development in their communities and nations. Tsitsi Dangarembga is all of the above. And this is one of the reasons why you can see that we have such a large attendance from young people here with us tonight, representing different African countries. This highlights the hunger for inspiration and for positive role models that exists in Africa right now. Now, in celebrating the inspiring Tsitsi Dangarembga, we have an exciting program which also includes a varied contributions of young people. And we will kick off with a video screening of a short film that we have titled Beyond Nervous Conditions, which is a play on words, followed by the official introduction by our regional director, Ms. Inge Herbert. We will then have a Laudatio performance by a German-South African actress who's also a friend and colleague of Tsitsi Dangarembga, Thandi Sebe. We will then have the presentation of the Freedom Award to Tsitsi Dangarembga, where she will also then deliver a speech on confronting Zimbabwe's culture of oppression, a citizen agency approach. I'm really looking forward to that one. The speech will then be followed by a performance by South African music trio, R&B and soul trio, Jamali. And Jamali is more than just a great music band. They also serve as a source of empowerment to young female artists. We will then close off the evening's proceedings soon after with food and drinks, and opportunities for photo ops that you saw banners outside as you came in. Please feel free to use the hashtags that you are seeing on your screen and tag FNF Africa. And remember, if there are no pictures, it didn't happen. So to get the show on the road, we would like to set the move of tonight with the screening of the film Nervous Conditions, which will then be followed by the opening by our regional director, Ms. Inge Herbert. Do enjoy.
Tsitsi Dangarembga, a celebrated Zimbabwean author, filmmaker, and activist, was born on February 4, 1959, in Mutoko, Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. She is most renowned for her groundbreaking novel, Nervous Conditions, a pivotal work in African literature. Beyond her writing, Tsitsi is a versatile talent, excelling as a filmmaker and playwright. She is a vocal advocate for social justice and women's rights in Zimbabwe and across Africa. Her advocacy covers critical issues like economic inequality, political oppression, and gender-based violence. Tsitsi's commitment to human rights has earned her numerous awards and accolades in both the literary and cinematic worlds. However, her commitment to these principles led her down a challenging path. On July 31st, 2020, Tsitsi and journalist Julie Barnes took to the streets of Harare, Zimbabwe's capital, to demand institutional reforms and a brighter future for their country. Their peaceful demonstration came at odds with President Emmerson Mnangagwa's authoritarian rule, which had previously prohibited opposition and activist gatherings. As they walked their placards, Tsitsi and Julie were apprehended by the police, ultimately leading to their arrest. Their ensuing trial spanned over 2 years, clearly intended to make them examples of dissent. This case has garnered substantial global attention, shining a spotlight on the difficulties faced by activists, writers, and advocates for political reform in Zimbabwe, where such trials sadly occur on a regular basis. But even in challenging conditions, we have to always look ahead. As an advocate for education and literacy, Tsitsi has always encouraged young people to engage with literature and the arts, promoting critical thinking and creativity. She has also been involved in initiatives to improve access to education for marginalized communities. So what do the youth, the future of our continent, have to say about Tsitsi Dangarembga?
I've read Tsitsi Dangarembga's work, such as Nervous Condition.
I've read Nervous Conditions.
Nervous Conditions.
Nervous Conditions.
I think that Tsitsi's work shows a clear connection to changes and steps towards social justice taken up by African youth today.
Like back in Morocco, we are so much in need of positive role models who can guide girls towards the right path, whether it's education, whether it's sexual life, whether it's anything. Especially for education, we really need role models.
Because in a world that we live in, I believe that women are still looked down upon.
As women, we've been left down a lot because the society expects us to sit at home so that our husbands or men take care of us.
She brings out all these challenges that we're currently facing. Even in Zimbabwe, currently in the rural areas, most girls do not have access to education or have limited access to education, which has poor quality. And this is something that she constantly discusses in all her works.
In many ways, freedom is about adaptability, consistency, and resilience. These are some of the main character strengths identified by the youth about Tsitsi Dangarembga.
I believe Tsitsi's multifaceted storytelling is actually an advantage because we live in a very digital world right now.
In our current generation, it is rare to find a person voluntarily holding a book and reading it. We are often on our phones, we are colonized by social media.
Tsitsi is showing a flexibility to accommodate different audiences, right? which not many authors are willing to do.
And I think that is one thing Tsitsi identified, that communication goes way beyond writing. It goes in many forms. It can go in pictures, it goes to films, it goes to many other things.
When I talk about the film industry, I mean from also research, I've noticed that many male counterparts in the whole film industry, movie industry, and less female. I don't know if it's actually changing, but I feel like it's changing. And like she wanted more females to be involved in this. So her actually wanting that and implementing a way in which girls can move into the film industry actually just, I don't know, highlighted the whole work that she did.
She truly does represent freedom. Through her work and passions, even in an ever-changing world, for the good or for the worst, she will forever remain an inspiration to the youth for decades to come.
Her work that she has done previously inspires me to not let anything stand in my way.
Tsitsi's story inspires me to remain original because I believe that original stories are the ones that get the attention.
On a personal level, her novel Black and Female encouraged me to write a poem called Feminine Melanin, which is about showing strength in who you are, being proud of your own skin no matter what it is like, and taking that stereotype that people have to be your sword.
Dear Tsitsi Dangarembga, dear Tsitsi, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. On 23 and 24 of August 2023, national elections were held in Zimbabwe and President Mnangagwa declared victory. The report of the Southern African Development Community Observer Mission on the elections flagged voting delays, the banning of opposition rallies, and biased state media coverage. Subsequently, Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema, chairperson of the SADC organ on politics, defense and security cooperation, refused to attend Mnangagwa's inauguration and was instead represented by his ambassador in Harare. Other heads of state followed suit. Mnangagwa took his oath of office with only 3 sitting presidents from the Southern African Development Community states. This important signal sent out by fellow African leaders is unprecedented. Hakainde Hichilema has received the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, FNF, Africa Freedom Prize in 2017, while he was the leader of the opposition in Zambia. Next to Hichilema, the previous awardees are Mmusi Maimane, Gareth Cliff, Bobby Wine, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and Selou Dalein Diallo. Mmusi Maimane is here with us today. I greet you, Mmusi. Dear Tsitsi, today you are receiving the FNF Africa Freedom Prize 2023. You are not only an acclaimed author and screenwriter whose work is published and read in countries all over the world. You are also a thought leader and a mentor, and you incorporate courage, hope, and active citizenship. On July 31st, 2020, Tsitsi Dangarembga, together with journalist Julie Barnes, demonstrated in Harare, calling for institutional reforms and a better Zimbabwe. The posters the 2 women were carrying read, "We want better, reform our institutions. Free our journalists, we want a better Zimbabwe for all." Since the removal of long-term ruler Robert Mugabe in 2017, autocrat Emmerson Mnangagwa has been in power. Ahead of the 2023 elections, he prohibited planned demonstrations by activists and opposition parties. While this was a directive from the president, it cannot be justified by any legal basis. On the contrary, the Zimbabwean constitution recognizes the right to assembly and freedom of expression. I quote from Article 58 of the Zimbabwean constitution. "Every person has the right to freedom of assembly, and association, and the right not to assemble or associate with others. While Tsitsi Dangarembga and Julie Barnes were walking along the street with their posters, they were stopped by police officers and subsequently arrested without being given any reasons. Dangarembga and Barnes were indeed released on bail the following day, but they were then charged before the Zimbabwean Anti-Corruption Court, which is directly under the jurisdiction of President Mnangagwa. The charges included, among other things, incitement to violence. What followed was a harrowing ordeal that spanned over 2 years, involving more than 30 trial days, evidence manipulation and intimidation. In the event of a conviction, Tsitsi Dangarembga and Julie Barnes faced the prospect of more than 2 years of imprisonment. FNF colleagues on the ground continuously monitored the trial and witnessed firsthand how the defendants stood steadfast and courageous throughout it. The trial garnered worldwide headlines. The Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung headlined, "In Zimbabwe, resisting means staying put." The Neue Zürcher Zeitung reported, "Admired worldwide, persecuted at home. Peace laureate Tsitsi Dangarembga stands trial in Zimbabwe." After a conviction by the Anti-Corruption Court and long litigation, the High Court in Harare finally delivered a verdict on May 8, 2023, stating that the previous judgment was flawed and acquitted the writer Tsitsi Dangarembga on all counts. Tsitsi, you are celebrated in Africa and beyond, not only as an acclaimed writer and role model. When we sent out the invitation for today, people responded with enthusiasm, saying that you were one of their heroes and that they have been reading your books at school. Tsitsi, we admire your commitment to active citizenship and the courage you displayed in traveling from Germany to Zimbabwe to face the trial. When I asked you about how you put up that courage to actually travel from Germany, risking that you would be put in prison in Zimbabwe, you said you have to, even in an oppressive regime, demonstrate trust in institutions. We are aware of the arbitrariness and inhumane intimidation within Zimbabweans' prisons. We are the more delighted to have you here with us today and celebrate freedom and the FNF Africa Freedom Prize for you. I would now like to ask Ms. Thandi Sebe on stage. Thandi is a German South African actor and writer working in Cape Town and Berlin. She has been co-script writing with Tsitsi Dangarembga, and we invited Thandi for the laudatio. Thandi.
Dear guests, dear Tsitsi, I think it goes without saying that I feel incredibly honored to be here tonight, to get to speak about Tsitsi, to get to celebrate this special day with you. More so than excited and honored, I feel extremely, extremely nervous. You know, the type of nervousness that goes throughout your whole body and sweaty fingers and all of that. In fact, the last time that I felt this nervous was the very first time that I met Tsitsi, which was back in 2019. I had been invited by Zukiswa Vana and the Goethe Institute in Nairobi to take part in a performance called Artistic Encounters. And I agreed before I knew what that really meant. I thought that it was something about two artists coming together from different fields, creating something new, collaborating on something on stage. I thought maybe I would be paired with a musician that would play the saxophone or the trumpet or something, and I would read poetry. That's not what it was. I then realized that I was expected to do an interpretive performance piece of Tsitsi Dangarembga's works, her trilogy, her novels, starting, of course, with Nervous Conditions, The Book of Nat, and This Mournable Body. Now, I have to be completely honest. I mean, I don't have to be, and I shouldn't be. I should totally lie, but I will be honest with you. I had heard about Tsitsi at the time, but I had not read her books, which, you know, maybe Shame on me, but also maybe shame on the South African school system at the time. I don't know, I don't want to point fingers. But I do think that maybe a little less Shakespeare, a little bit more Tsitsi Dangarembga would have been great. Anyways, I began to read, starting of course with her first novel, Nervous Conditions, which is exactly how I'm feeling up here right now. And when I read that first line, that first memorable line, I was not sorry when her brother died. When my brother died, I realized like, oh, okay, this is serious stuff. This is not light literature. And I became so nervous. And I don't know if you realize how close I was to canceling that performance. I think I may have told you since, but I was trying to come up with all these ideas because I realized how important her work is. And so I thought of calling up Zukiswa and telling her that I'm not feeling great, I've got a flu or something. In fact, I was starting to feel that, you know, that tingling that you feel at the back of your throat, like the day before an exam or something. I'm glad I didn't cancel. I don't know what gave me the strength to continue. I think it may have been my dad, who, when I told him I have to back out of it, said, you cannot do that. That is Tsitsi Dangarembga. You have to do this performance. So I did. But then standing there in Kenya, in Nairobi, on that stage, doing a performance piece of these incredibly important works of Tsitsi's that have won so many awards and been so important to so many people across the globe, it was truly terrifying. And it was, honestly, it was a little bit, the setting was kind of like this. I was up on stage and Tsitsi was right there in the front row, and I was putting so much effort into trying not to look at her because I was so scared that I might catch a glimpse in her eyes of her thinking, oh my God, what is she doing, butchering my work like this? But of course, Tsitsi was incredibly kind afterwards. We spoke. And in fact, she asked me if I'd like to join her as a writer on one of her projects that she was working on. And so fast forward 3 to 10 years, I don't know, COVID has messed up my sense of time. We are working together, and so I've really been privileged to experience Tsitsi as a writer, the artist behind the work. And I feel so grateful for that. And so I've been asked to talk here about Tsitsi as an artist as opposed to her as an activist, because other people, of course, are doing that. But I think it's clear to all of us that in Tsitsi's case, it's really difficult to separate the two because Tsitsi's work has always been extremely political. I'm not going to go too much into her timeline or her body of work because I guess if you're here, then you're here to celebrate her, in which case you know her work and it means something to you, it's important to you. I want to talk about how I have experienced Tsitsi over the years and how I have witnessed her as an artist, as a filmmaker, as a writer. And the one thing about Tsitsi is that she is really incredibly, incredibly passionate about her work, about her stories. She takes her role as a storyteller really very seriously. There's nothing in the stories she tells that is arbitrary, willkürlich. She is meticulous in crafting her characters. Her choice of words is always deliberate and very thought out. And I'm going to tell you a little story about when we were working on this film that I was telling you about, the screenplay. We were writing on Zoom because that's just how people work these days. And for everybody, I mean, everybody probably knows how sometimes difficult it can be to work over Zoom. No matter how interesting the subject matter, it is just extremely, extremely difficult to stare at a screen for multiple hours at a time, unless you're watching, you know, Netflix or TikTok videos, in which case, easy breezy. But working together, writing on Zoom, there was, so for context, we were working on the screenplay and we were taking this new outline and writing it out. And it was the very first draft of this new outline. And so some writers, a lot of writers I know will call that the vomit draft because, you know, it's just about getting something out there. It doesn't need to be good, but not so Tsitsi. We were writing the scene together and we were talking about what our protagonist should be wearing in sets. I don't know if Tsitsi, if you remember this, but we were talking about what the protagonist should be wearing in the scene. And I was very happy to just say, so-and-so wearing a sporty outfit and be done with it. But Tsitsi was sending us screenshots of Google search results of various different shoes, sneakers, that she thought we should look at so that we could discuss the color and the type of shoe and the texture of the shoe of this protagonist. And okay, the reason that I'm saying this is that Tsitsi puts thought into everything that she creates. And of course, this reflects in her work. There are no throwaway lines in her writing. Tsitsi is extremely, extremely hardworking. I don't think she knows work-life balance. I think she balances work with more work and working out, because yes, she goes to the gym, of course. Tsitsi works like a beast, which is, I know, not appropriate to say at a function like this, a fancy function like this, but I really feel like those are the appropriate words to describe Tsitsi. She's incredibly, incredibly hardworking. I never know where on earth she is in the world. We'll be having our Zoom sessions writing, and then the one day she'll be in Hamburg, the next in Berlin, the next in Zim, the next in a place that I've never heard of. I think she has more hours in a day than the rest of us, because she works on numerous projects at the same time, which for many people could be disastrous, but in Tsitsi's case, she rarely manages to get things done. It is not without reason that Nervous Conditions was the first novel published in English written by a Black Zimbabwean woman. Tsitsi is a trailblazer, a woman of strength and courage and persistence. She spent years looking for somebody to publish that book, and in fact, she spent years writing it. She was 21 when she started writing, and 24 when she finished writing Nervous Conditions, which is insane. Yes, please, but that is good. I mean, I don't know what you were doing when you were 21, but I was certainly not writing award-winning novels in my spare time. It's incredible. Perhaps because she always knew that what she had to say was important. She's always been a feminist, a Black feminist, an African feminist. She has fought and continues to fight against the system that has worked against her as a writer, as a Black woman in the film industry, against a system of oppression as a whole. I think I speak for many other young or youngish people when I say, thank you for the work that you've done, for the way that you have written about this part of the continent, for forcing the world to pay attention. I've really learned a lot from Tsitsi as a writer. One thing is to take your characters very seriously. The other is never rush a process. And another really practical advice, I actually learned that very first day in Nairobi, when we got together that first time. It was after I survived the performance, and there was a little Q&A happening on stage, and people were allowed to ask Tsitsi questions. And one woman in the audience was very excited to ask her about that memorable first line, "I was not sorry when my brother died." And she asked her, how had that line come to you? And I think she was expecting an almost spiritual answer. And Tsitsi sat there and was very honest, and she said that she had actually already finished writing Nervous Conditions, and that line was not there. And then she read a book about how to write a novel, and in that book it said, have a memorable first line. And I just love that so much. It's really stuck with me. It's really not romantic at all, but it really is just solid, great, practical advice. Tsitsi, I'm so very grateful to be able to learn these valuable writing skills from you, but even more so, I'm grateful that you teach us young artists to use our voices. You believe that you must fight for the type of world that you want to live in. I have seen you enraged many, many, many times about racism in Europe and Germany, about oppression or indignities you witness in Zimbabwe or abroad. But I always see you use that rage and you funnel it into an expression. You put it into your books or your speeches, and you turn it into fuel to continue fighting for things to change. So I hope for us younger writers to learn from Tsitsi and to use our voices to challenge injustices whenever we see them, whether it is gender-based violence in Zimbabwe or racism in Germany, or the continued mistreatment of migrants on the borders of Europe or South Africa. I keep being reminded by Tsitsi that it is our job as privileged peoples of this world to speak up. So Tsitsi, I hope for your future and for all of ours that you continue to use your films, your books, your writing to challenge oppressive systems. And on a more personal level, I hope that you like chill more, because you really deserve it. You really do. Es sei dir gegönnt, Tsitsi. Thank you so much. I actually have a little bit of a silly little joke. There's a song that I want to play, and this is kind of an insider between Tsitsi and myself, although I'm not even sure if Tsitsi knows, and I'm terrified she might get really angry. I have reason to believe that she's kind of obsessed with this song. It's completely unrelated to this event, but kind of still makes sense, because I guess it is, after all, still a song about freedom. So I don't know where you can play it. Thank you. Thank you, Tsitsi.
Thank you, Thandi. It is truly a blessing to be in a space where we have role models that we can learn from, but not from a distance, but through working with them. And that's a real privilege. And thank you to you, Inge, for your opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pride that we now move on to the heart of our gathering today. And this is the presentation of the Freedom Prize. So I would like to invite back on stage again our Regional Director, Ms. Inge Herbert. Followed by our FNF Zimbabwe Project Manager, Fungisai Sithole. And of course, Ms. Julie Barnes, of whom we are aware was arrested, trialed, convicted, and acquitted together with Ms. Tsitsi Dangarembga. And Thandi, please do feel free to also come and join us on stage. Now, for this one, we need to bring the house down. And I do not mean that literally, of course, but I think Tsitsi deserves a real warm welcome on stage. So, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Tsitsi Dangarembga. And because it was our colleague, Ms. Fungisai Sithole, who attended a lot of the trials that Ms. Julie and Ms. Tsitsi Dangarembga attended, Fungisai will be the one that's going to be presenting the Freedom Prize to Tsitsi. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2023 Africa Freedom Prize. Yeah. Thank you. And to deliver her talk on confronting Zimbabwe's culture of oppression, a citizen agency approach, Ms. Tsitsi Dangarembga.
thing I would like to say to everybody who is here today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your generosity, for your warm welcome. Thank you for the applause, which is so healing. It is so healing. Thank you for being yourselves, and thank you for being in this moment that we are facing on the continent, which is a very difficult moment from the north to the south. Your being here today makes me feel that we are certainly taking on the challenges together. So I'd like to say good evening again to all the honored guests, friends, and colleagues, and to let you know that I am astonished at being awarded the Friedrich Naumann Foundation Africa Freedom Prize this evening. I used to look at the list of names of people who had been awarded this prize before, and it did not seem to me that it was something that I would ever have anything to do with. So I would like to thank the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for the distinction. As we heard earlier this evening, the Friedrich Naumann Foundation website says that the Africa Freedom Prize honors outstanding personalities who provide decisive impulses for the development of liberal civil society in African countries. Often in our region and on our continent, we tend to think that civil liberties are under threat, and that this threat comes from corrupt dictatorship. I take what I think is a more radical and hopeful view of the situation. I do not think that civil liberties are under threat. My proposition is that they are nascent, yet to be established. Civil liberty is the state of being subject to laws that are established for the good of the community and the good of each individual in the community. When I say that I do not think that our civil liberties are under threat, this is not to say that we are not reeling from the maelstrom of corrupt dictatorships and virulent totalitarianism. Indeed, we are. And it is my contention that this state of affairs is to be expected in nations that are wrestling with the shadow of colonization and its formational ill effects. Civil liberties will only flourish on our continent when we overcome socially and normatively a brutal and violent history that stretches back half a millennium to our first engagements with Europe, and further back to our earlier engagement with the Arab world. The Africa Freedom Prize of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation is an award that recognizes individuals who have freely and willingly taken on the task of undoing the violations of the past as they manifest in our present dispensations. I am honored to be the recipient of this award, along with such illustrious Africans as President Hakainde Hichilema of Zambia, Mmusi Maimane, leader of South Africa's Build One South Africa Party, Bobi Wine, presidential candidate in Uganda's 2021 election, who we heard this evening was arrested on his return to his homeland just today, and the incomparable Chimamanda Adichie, whose writings and cinematic adaptation of her fiction have made her a household name on our continent and beyond. The nascent civil liberties many of us on the continent seek to build up have champions in these great Africans and in others whose quiet, dedicated work is not as well known. Much has been made internationally of my July 2020 arrest by the Zimbabwe Republic Police for walking down a street peacefully carrying 2 placards that read, "Free Hopewell, Free Jacob, #Zimbabwe," and "We want better, reform our institutions." Much was also made of my conviction last year in my country's lower court on charges of attending a meeting with intent to incite public violence, breach of the peace, or acts of bigotry. No, that's not a joke, it actually happened. However, the High Court of Zimbabwe overturned that conviction on May 8 this year. As a result, Julie Barnes, who walked down the road with me on that Friday morning 3 years ago, and I are now free citizens of our country. And we have seen Julie up front, but Julie, please stand up again so that you can receive your own applause, all on your own. I celebrate you, Julie. Thank you for joining me and giving me the courage to walk down that road. Other nurturers and builders of civil rights in Zimbabwe have not experienced the same outcome that Julie and I have enjoyed. Jacob Dangarembga, who called for the peaceful demonstration of 31 July 2020, was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment on charges of inciting public violence. Opposition politician and lawyer Job Sikala has been in prison since June 14, 2022, when he was arrested for incidents connected to the femicide of the late opposition activist More Blessing Ali. More Blessing Ali was abducted in broad daylight on May 24, 2022, by known ZANU-PF members. The state downplayed the abduction, claiming that one of the abductors was the deceased's former boyfriend, so that the abduction was a domestic affair. Here we see the misogyny that is endemic in oppressive regimes. Job Sikala represented the Ali family in the abduction case. Dissatisfied with the way the state handled the matter, Sikala conducted investigations that led to the recovery of Ali's dismembered remains in a well on a property belonging to the mother of one of the men Ali had last been seen with. Job was arrested at Ali's funeral and imprisoned without bail, and he's been in prison ever since. In May this year, he was found guilty of obstruction of justice and received a suspended 6-month jail sentence, but remains in pre-trial incarceration on other charges. Sikala personally asked me by communication from prison to champion his cause. In response to his request, I gave him my pledge to do so. If there are people in the room who are skilled in campaigning for the release of unjustly imprisoned individuals, I would be grateful if you would approach me later this evening to assist me in the work of obtaining Job Sikala's freedom. I am asking for help because that kind of campaign is not my core business. What I have come to see is that my core business is the business of increasing citizen agency. I conceive of agency as the decision process and the decision process and capability to pursue individual or collective action. As a young woman who grew up disadvantaged by patriarchy, it was clear to me that women needed more agency. I consciously set out to tell the stories of women in my plays, prose, and films in an effort to increase Zimbabwean and other African women's awareness of the power they inherently possess by virtue of their existence. When, however, the socio-politico-economic crisis in Zimbabwe worsened over the past 2 decades, I observed that while they might have more agency compared to women, men too were losing their agency to decide on and pursue individual or collective actions. I realized that every single ordinary citizen who is not associated with prevailing power structures loses agency under conditions of dictatorship. And that, in fact, totalitarian national authorities intentionally undermine their citizens' capacity for agency. The current authorities in Zimbabwe use diverse methods and strategies to deprive Zimbabwean citizens of agency in order to bend the citizens of Zimbabwe to their will. I am now going to play a video that circulated on Zimbabwean social media in the run-up to the deeply flawed elections that were held in my country in August this year. This video shows how narrative in song, accompanied by rhythmic bodily movement, that is, dance, is used to inculcate into and entrench certain ideas in the population. Could we have the first video, please?
Makununde waniti bombe, Mujane makununde waniti bombe, Mujane makununde waniti bombe, Mujane makununde waniti bombe, Mujane makununde waniti uraye, 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 Mujane makununde waniti bombe, Mujane makununde waniti bombe, Mujane makununde waniti bombe, Mujane makununde waniti bombe, Mujane makununde waniti bombe.
Although I was distressed by this video, I was not surprised by it. Stuart Donen, in his book, Kingdom, Power, Glory, Mugabe, ZANU, and the Quest for Supremacy, 1960 to 1987, details how the coercive, violent element of nationalist politics begun in the 1960s was revealed as foundational to nationalist strategy in the 1970s through the operations of the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, ZANU. Donen says, rural communities were reminded of the need to cooperate with the Zanla Wakomana, which is boys, by random killings unaccompanied by explanations or justification, while at other times victims were arbitrarily deemed sellouts and dealt with accordingly. Donen writes of how a young Robert Gabriel Mugabe had, in 1962, told the executive of the first nationwide nationalist party the Zimbabwe African People's Union, ZAPU, while he was its publicity secretary, that the population in the rural lands, where around 80% of the country's highly melanated population resided, were on the whole indifferent to politics. The implication was that the rural populations needed to be shaken out of their indifference and into support for the nationalist movements. Strategies of atrocity and terror were used to effect this change in Zimbabwe's rural populations. Thus, by 1979, when the armed struggle came to an end, ZANU-PF, headed by Robert Mugabe, had established a vice-like grip on the rural populations. The scale of ZANU-PF's terror activities in the rural areas was such that other parties were critically disadvantaged, as they were unable to campaign in ZANU-PF-occupied territories. Occupied, I use that word advisedly, and I will expand on that in the next section. So, other parties were unable to campaign in ZANU-PF-occupied territories. This pattern of behavior has been maintained to the present day, supplemented by administrative deceptions, in other words, rigging. It was on pondering this aspect of Zimbabwe's history that I came up with the concept of what I call internal colonization. By internal colonization, I refer to a process in which a section of a national population emigrates from its homeland for the purposes of establishing a movement to wrest political power from a foreign colonizing authority, succeeds in doing so, and subsequently establishes its own repressive regime over the home country's population. I call the process internal colonization because, in effect, the liberation movement becomes a state in exile with its own culture, economy, legal system, and norms. Where the state in exile's culture is violent and militaristic, this violent military culture is imposed on citizens when the state in exile establishes itself as the government in the homeland. The pre-election video we saw a few minutes ago is a cultural product of the Zimbabwean internally colonizing authorities. It uses the methods of narrative embedded in song, reinforced by rhythmic body movements, to instill certain attitudes, dispositions, and propensities to behavior into citizens. We in this room might think that every person who sees this video is as horrified as I believe we are. On the contrary, the primitive brain, where such images are initially processed, we all have the primitive brain, by the way, it's not just certain people. The primitive brain, where such images are initially processed, does not distinguish between virtual images, for example, the virtual images of a video, and real-life situations. Virtual images can therefore provide compelling material for role modeling. Images such as those contained in the video can be interpreted as representing power and solidarity, which are seductive concepts to the disempowered and fearful in our societies. Creative arts products that appeal to a person's emotional and motivational systems, such as song, dance, and stories that descend into propaganda, are routinely deployed by internal colonizers to keep their victim populations ignorant, mentally numb, and subjugated. Those of us who work for the establishment of civil liberties and for these liberties' necessary precursor, that is, citizen agency, by and large neglect to use such compelling tools of formation effectively. NGO interventions too often take the form of didactic teachings aimed at a person's intellectual, cognitive systems. However, human motivation is derived from human beings' emotional, affective systems. The change we desire can only be realized when our emotional and affective systems are engaged positively over wide sectors of the population. Therefore, to effect the change towards civil liberty that we want to see, it is imperative that citizens be given the cognitive and the emotional motivational tools they need to champion change in their lives and communities. To illustrate what I mean, I will now play for you an audio clip from a film I am developing. The film is a musical, and it is called Queuing. It is not the film I'm working on with Thandi, it's another one. Queuing tells the story of the lengths people go to find the fuel necessary for daily life in an environment of chronic fuel shortages and a corrupt police force, such as we have in Zimbabwe. In the scene you are about to hear narrated, a miller whose name is Boniface is accosted by corrupt policemen after the fuel runs out at his grinding mill, and he leaves a crowd of angry women with their sacks of grain to search for fuel. This scene is from the first part of the film, where the societal problem is described. The last part of the film offers the solution of citizen solidarity and action to overcome oppression. We will only see the first part, though. Please focus your attention on the audio. The visuals are only mood board to add atmosphere as the work is still in development. I hope everybody enjoyed the music and has experienced the potential that artistic narratives have to promote citizen agency and civil liberties in our societies through the ability of these narratives to explain social dilemmas and to offer solutions that can have a role modeling effect that motivates freedom-seeking behavior amongst citizens. I say again, Friedrich Naumann Foundation, thank you for this prestigious award, and thank you everybody for your attention.
I think Mali a drink is also a very South African experience that many can share. But when I started, I spoke about also looking ahead on top of the challenges that a lot of the countries in the SADC region in particular face. And the most significant, I think, that resonates with me from your presentation or talk, Tsitsi, is basically countering the deterioration of our democracies using methods that we have seen have worked, that have been used by the liberation movements. And I think more can certainly be done on that. So thank you. As we near the conclusion of our program, it is time to transition into the party mode of our evening. So I cannot believe this as a millennial. 2 or 3 decades or so ago, 2 decades or so ago, if you told me that I would be on stage inviting Jamali for a performance, I would not believe you. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jamali.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing? Love the sound of that.
We just want to say congratulations to Tsitsi. This one is for you because you're simply the best.
Absolutely.
All right. If you know the words to this one, sing along, especially for you. Let's go.
Give us some more volume, please.
Come on.
I need you in my heart's on fire.
Oh, yeah.
Come to me, wide and wide. When you come to me, give me everything I need. Lifetime promises and a world of dreams.
And a big thank you to Gemma Fassi for standing in for Lizo today. So give her a round of applause, everybody. This is Gemma Fassi.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the rest of your evening, everybody.
Are we asking for another performance? We want more. I think we can have our individual sessions during the outside area with Chabali. Unfortunately, we have to conclude our evening's proceedings. It is with immense gratitude that we are so thankful that you were able to join us here tonight as we celebrate the outstanding contributions of Ms. Tsitsi Dangarembga to freedom. We hope this event, this evening, has left you inspired and motivated to be agents of positive change in your communities. As we bid farewell, we encourage you to carry the spirit of freedom and activism with you and always play your part in growing the list of positive role models in the African continent. A special thank you to my colleagues at FNF who organized this event and ensuring, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that tonight's event was a success. Nicolette, Tsekedi, Petunia, Wayne, even our finance staff, Tina, Lotta, thank you so much for your contributions. And yeah, the Marimba Band, please come back on stage. They will be playing us out. And just before the Marimba Band performs, we just have to make a few announcements that there is a food truck outside and drinks are being served as well in the outside area. Good night, and let's continue the discussions, and may the pursuit of freedom and justice continue to guide our collective journey. Thank you, and take care.